Okay. Today is Friday, January 26, 2018. My name is Dan Abrahamowitz, former Vice President for Student Affairs and current member of the Wright State University Retirees Association. We're here as part of the Retiree Association's Oral History Project, and we're very pleased this morning to be interviewing Jim Brown. Jim is the first coach we have interviewed for this series, coaching men's basketball for over 26 years, and now is a color commentator for Wright State Radio. Men's basketball on Wright State Radio. How you doing, Jim?
I'm good. Good to be here.
Listen, tell us a little bit about yourself. I know we know a little bit about your history at Wright State University and so on, but what about before that? Where are you from? Where were you born? Where did you go to school? And so forth.
Well, I've lived in Dayton most of my life. My parents moved to Dayton when I was 6 years old.
Where were they before?
Well, they were in Lancaster, Ohio. My dad was actually a basketball coach for a short period of time. And I really never talked with him about why he got out of it. He actually took a team to the state championship here in Ohio. He was a small school down in southeastern Ohio called Corning High School. And he had the player of the year in the state that year. And but he got out of coaching. We moved to Dayton. He got into the banking business, and then later into, he worked for a company called Agri Register, which had their building right across from the Dragon Stadium now.
Now, what year did you move to Dayton?
We moved in, we moved in 1950 during that blizzard.
Is that right?
In fact,
there's a 1950, but they've recently had the talk about 78 blizzard.
But the blizzard in 50 was a bad one too. It was actually Ohio State played Michigan that weekend.
Oh, the famous Ohio State-Michigan snow game.
Yes, and of course I don't remember that. I just remember when we got to Dayton, I had to sleep in a bathtub that night because our furniture didn't make it. But so I
and how old were you then? When you
6?
Oh, 6. You said 6.
6.
Right.
I went to Belmont High School, played basketball there. Then I went to the University of Dayton. I played freshman basketball for the Flyers. Graduated from there in 1966. And then I went to Xavier University and got a master's degree in guidance counseling. And
you went right from UD to Xavier?
I did. I took ROTC. A lot of people won't, but they'll kind of say, really? But when I was at Dayton, you had to take ROTC. It was required. And I had to take it my freshman and sophomore year. Then after your freshman and sophomore year, if you got invited to go on, you could accept that and go for 2 more years. And then when you graduated, you were commissioned as an officer in the Army. And that's what I did. And I was commissioned as an officer in the Army, and they gave me a 1-year deferment to pursue a master's degree.
What was your bachelor's degree in? What did you get?
It was in biology, education. I wanted to be a biology teacher. And then I thought, well, I'll do that for a while, and I want to be a guidance counselor because that might be a little easier. But anyway, so I did that, and I only had 1 year to do that. So after that year, I went into the Army. And
did you get your degree in the year then?
No, I had everything done except for my research paper. And I had to kind of rush my research paper, and he didn't accept it. The professor didn't accept it, which turned out to be kind of a blessing later on as things turned out. So anyway, in May of '68, I had to start my Army commitment.
And how was that, for 4 years?
2.
2 years.
Just 2 years. I was stationed in Fort Lee, Virginia. I went to Redstone Arsenal, Alabama. And then from there, I was sent to Vietnam. And when they sent me to Vietnam, I only
What year did you go to Vietnam?
I went there in September of '69. It was a time when they had the largest number of troops in Vietnam. And
Central Highlands?
No, I was right on the Cambodian border. We were 3 miles from the Cambodian border. It was called Tay Ninh, but everybody called it Rocket City because we just got hit with rockets all the time. They would shoot them from Cambodia into our base camp. Nobody in my company ever got killed, but you never were easy. I mean, there were days when I sat in my bed one night, laid in my bed one night and heard 230, I counted them, 238 mortars land.
My gosh.
And who's the next one going to land here? So what happened about my research paper was Nixon decided he was going to start withdrawing troops. And so if you could show that you were going back to college, they would give you some days off. So I had everything done but my research paper, So I wrote Xavier, and they said yes, and so I got out. I got out a couple months early of my.
So how long were you in Vietnam?
I was actually in Vietnam 7 months. It was very unusual, Dan, to be sent to Vietnam,
Yeah.
particularly as an officer for less than a year. And I thought I was home free. I really did. I was married, and
You got married before you went to
I
Vietnam?
got married before I went to Vietnam.
Did you get married while you were at UD?
I got married. We were married in August of 1970. 1967. What happened is when I graduated from Dayton, I decided that I was going to get my master's degree, but I said I would do some substitute teaching, but just a couple days a week.
Yes.
Well, the Dayton Public Schools called me and said, Jim, we have this, I know you only want to sub a couple days a week, but we have this opportunity where we just need you for 2 weeks. And after 2 weeks, there's a situation where the person will be back in 2 weeks. Well, so I accepted it. It was at Eastmont Elementary. And I go over there, and the principal at the time knew me because I had played basketball against them as an 8th grader. And he's introducing me to the faculty members, and he introduced me to this math teacher, and it was my future wife. We started dating each other and got married shortly after that in '67. But anyway, when I got out of Vietnam in February of '70, prior to getting out, I think it might have been in December of '69, I got a letter in the mail from John Ross, my high school coach. And
high school coach at Belmont.
My high school coach at Belmont, who I had done some scouting work with. Back in those days, you could scout teams live, and it was permissible at the NCAA level to scout teams live. In other words, you could go and watch a team play and scout them. What John did was he started his own little business where he would look at local schools like Miami, Xavier, Cincinnati, Dayton, and he'd look at their schedule and he'd find teams on there that were a long ways away, and instead of them sending somebody and spending a lot of money to scout, he would do a report and sell it to them. And so I helped him do that.
Did he go on his own and then recouped his expenses by selling the report?
In fact, one time, I tell this story because Wright State this past weekend just played up at Milwaukee, and we played in. It's called the Panther Arena now, but it started out as the Mecca. It was built in 1970.
In Milwaukee.
1950, yeah, in Milwaukee. It's built in 1950. It's a gorgeous arena now. I was just in it the other night because that's where Wright State played. But the interesting thing is, in 1968, I think it was like in January of '68, John Ross, his wife, my wife, and I flew to Milwaukee, and we scouted a tournament. There was a tournament up there. There were 4 teams in the tournament. LSU with Pete Maravich. Florida State with Dave Cowens, who was a great player in the NBA. Marquette and Wisconsin. Those were the 4 teams. And we scouted all 4 teams. John sold the reports. It paid for all of our airline expenses, paid for our hotel expenses, and he gave me a couple $100. And he did that. And I think that might be why when he was named the coach at Wright State, the first coach at Wright State, he asked me to be his assistant because I kind of worked with him, and I think he kind of appreciated what I did.
He was hired when at Wright State?
He was hired, I want to say, when he was hired, they decided to start the program as a freshman and sophomore program. It wasn't an NCAA certified program. They played JV teams around the local areas like Ohio State and schools like that. So he only had freshmen and sophomores. They were all walk-ons. There was no scholarships. It was just him. I wasn't involved with that team because I was still in Vietnam. When I got back in February of '70, they had made the commitment to go make it a full-fledged varsity program where you were going to compete against 4-year schools. So I was involved in that. And I can remember I got home in February, and it was shortly after that I was out looking at players. And we signed 4 players that first year. We signed Jimmy Minch from Carroll High School, who I was involved in because that was right close to where I lived. David McGill from Belmont High School, Bill Fote from Piqua, and Greg McCurdy from Centerville. And those were our first 4 players.
So did you start at Wright State in February of '70?
I did, but I wasn't official.
You weren't
wasn't official. I was just he wanted me to be the assistant coach, but of course he had to go through a lot of hoops. That was one thing about Wright State, I tell people today, for example, Dan, if we wanted to offer a scholarship to a player, we had to get athletic council approval. We just couldn't go and say, hey, son, we're offering you a scholarship.
Yeah.
We had to get our academic things in line, get information, and give it to the athletic council.
So these 4 guys you just mentioned, you had to go through athletic
Yes,
council?
yes.
Was that done during that early period when you started?
I'd say this has been a long time ago, but I would say for the first 4 or 5 years, they were very cautious about the program. You're starting an athletic program from scratch.
I see.
They didn't want to have any issues.
You remember who was in charge of the athletic council back
Well, there was Carl Benner was on the athletic. Gordy Wise was on the athletic
Gordy
council.
Wise.
Carl Benner was a professor here.
Gordy Wise still does the PA
Still does the
announcement
PA.
at the basketball games.
Yes, he does. There was a physics professor, and I'm going to miss his name, but there was about, I want to say, 9 or 10 people on the athletic council, and they met periodically, and it wasn't a deal where we had to wait for them to meet. If we had a recruit that we felt we would get the academic information, give it to our athletic director, he would make some phone calls, and they would say yes or no.
So 1970 was seminal moment when John Ross hired you, and then you became assistant coach. Did you become sort of a full-time assistant coach?
No. The John wasn't full-time.
He wasn't even.
No,
full-time.
he wasn't even full-time. He actually, what John did during the day was he supervised student teachers. So he would
for
go
Wright State?
For Wright State. He would travel around this part of the Ohio
and sort of
observe them and critique them and help them become better teachers. And I worked for the admissions office. Well, actually, Dan, the first couple years I was still teaching. I got home in 70. I taught a year at Fairview High School, then a year at Longfellow. And both those years I was part-time at Wright State. I was making $1,000 or something. And it was, I think after that second year, which would have been 72, 73, they had made the commitment to build the PE building, and they decided they were going to make the head coach and assistant coach full-time positions.
During those early years, where'd you guys play?
Well, we played at Stebbins High School.
Stebbins High School.
We practiced at Stebbins High School. We played at Stebbins High School.
And were you D2 at that
We were
period?
just what was called small college.
Small college.
We played schools like Cumberland and Kentucky, Berea, Wilmington, Otterbein, Wilmington. That was where John graduated from, and we lost. Wilmington killed us a couple times. It just killed John because when you were starting out, and the first 2 years we struggled. And I think the first year we won 8 games. Second year we won 9. But then we got it going. I mean, we went 17-5, 17-8.
So once you really were committed, and when was the PE building built?
73.
73.
It opened in 73.
So you were a UD guy. You were a Dayton guy, a UD guy,
Yeah.
Xavier. What was your impression of Wright State, and when you got the call from John?
I didn't know anything about it. When I was, I guess when I was in college, you read about. They were asking for people to contribute to. There was going to be a 2-year school, and it was a branch of Miami and Ohio State. And I can remember they were raising money to fund this school. They had one building. I never had been out there. In fact, the first time I was on campus was when I came out to meet with the athletic council when John was wanting me to be an assistant. I knew nothing about Wright State. I mean, I was a huge UD fan.
Well, in UG it was top notch.
Yes.
Was that the Donnie Mae era and so forth?
Yeah. Well, Donnie Mae and I played high school basketball together for John. John was the coach.
Donnie Mae was at Belmont.
Belmont. Bill Hoskett. Bill Hoskett went on to play at Ohio State and won an Olympic gold medal.
Did you think about college basketball at all?
Well, I played at UD and
Oh, you did play for
I
UD.
played at UD. I was a freshman there, and at that time they had freshmen weren't eligible, so you had your freshman team and then you had your varsity team, and you had to get invited to participate on the varsity. And the head coach at the time was Tom Blackburn, and he was very sick with cancer. And I think it had a bearing on my career. I don't regret anything, but I was a good player on the freshman team, but I didn't get the opportunity to advance. And So I stayed at UD. I didn't pursue going to another school or playing basketball because I was such a UD fan as a kid growing up. I mean, just lived and died with their basketball program. And even so, when I came to Wright State for a couple of years, I maintained my season tickets there and went to all their games. And then it just got too difficult. There was too many conflicts.
So the first couple of years were sort of a building the program thing with John Ross, right? And then, so like 73, you hit your stride, kind of.
Well, we had a winning season in '73.
Was that the first winning season?
Yeah.
And that was the first year with the new PE building.
Yeah. We opened a PE building. They had there's pictures of this, but they had stands on one side, and the game was on live television, Channel 2, and we played the game.
Is it the first game?
First game in the PE building, and they only had bleachers on one side, and then we had to move out. After that game was over, we couldn't play there while they installed the bleachers on the other side. So we played a game at Xenia Benner Fieldhouse. It's a great trivia question to ask somebody, where are the I think it's 5 sites now that Wright State played a home basketball game. And
can you name them?
Oh, yeah. One Stebbins. Yeah, I was at every one of them. Stebbins was our main place. Then we played that one game at Xenia. Then we played games at UD Arena. President Kagras told us, because we had such big crowds at the PE building, which only seated about 2,600, that if we wanted to play at UD Arena, we could do that, and he supported that. And we played some games down
nice
there.
Of UD.
Yeah. And then we played in the PE building, and we played in the Nutter Center. So 5 places. A lot of people can tell you the Stebbins, and they can tell you UD, but they can't remember Xenia because we only played
one time,
one game, and it was because they had to install the bleachers on the other side. But yeah.
So Ross was pretty successful then, as Wright State became a. Was still called small college back in?
Yeah, it was. There wasn't really. There really wasn't a definition of a Division I and Division II at that time. It was college and small college, and then I can't remember exactly when that transition occurred, where they started to classify you as Division II.
So when did Ross leave then?
Well, John coached at Wright State for 5 years, and
so it's 1975, roughly.
Yes, and you can understand this. The university, the athletic program was expanding, and Don Moore was our athletic director, and it was just Don. And we had soccer, we had swimming, we had baseball, we had basketball, probably golf. I can't remember all the sports, but
Did you have women's sports at that time?
Yes. We did women's swimming. I don't know about women's soccer.
Not basketball.
That's a good question. I know we didn't have it right away, but we got it shortly after that. So anyway, the athletic program was expanding, and they decided to hire an assistant athletic director. And Don approached John about, we're going to hire an assistant athletic director. Is this something you would be interested in? And John did. He took the job. I was really surprised because we were just turning the corner with our basketball program, and we were really starting to have some success. And he had this opportunity, and he took it. And that's when the university hired Marcus Jackson. And
in 1975, or 75, 76 season?
75, 76 season, and we had a really good season. We went to the NCAA tournament. It was with players that John and I had recruited, but we had a very successful season. I went to the NCAA tournament, and 2 years later, it was Marcus's 3rd year. To this day, I can't tell you what happened, but it was we were like 13-4, and we were playing Virginia Commonwealth, who was a Division I school. We were Division II. We were playing Virginia Commonwealth in the PE building. Place was sold out because they were 16-4, and we were like, we might have been 14-4, 14. We had a really good record. We lost the game by 4 points, and for whatever reason, our season just took a nosedive. We lost 10 games in a row.
Oh, my God.
And there were some issues between Marcus and Don and whatever. So anyway, at the end of the season, they decided to replace Marcus. And it was a contentious time here at the university in terms of Marcus felt like he was treated unfairly. And
so this was like 78 then?
Yeah, it would have been 78. And it was kind of a tough time for me because I didn't know where we were going to go with this. I mean, I was told that we're placing the head coach, but Jim, we want you to stay. You can apply for the job, and this and this and this. And so I knew Coach Underhill. I had talked with him on the phone a couple times. He was an assistant coach at Chattanooga.
Tennessee Chattanooga.
And they had just won the Division II National Championship. And so Ralph was
So wait, but before you get to it, Marcus was terminated
Yes.
after that season.
Yes, he was.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Which was a shock to me. I mean, I was very surprised that it happened. And Marcus was fine at first, but then he felt like I had something to do with it. And he filed a suit against the university, and it was finally settled. But it really, it kind of disrupted things for a while. And when Coach Underhill was hired, I was disappointed because I was promising things and it didn't happen. And so I was very disappointed. I thought, well, I was kind of stuck because it was May and I couldn't go anywhere. But when Coach Underhill came in and he had his press conference, he said, Jim, we're going to go to lunch. So we went to lunch. And he told me, he says, look, you're not going to be an assistant. We're going to be co-coaches. We're going to do this together. I'm going to.
He knew you?
No. We had talked on the phone.
You knew of him.
I never had met him.
Uh-huh.
We had talked on the phone a couple of times relative to scouting stuff. Teams we had played that they were about to play, but I had never met him. He came up and he had his press conference and everything. We went to lunch after that. He told me, he said, I know what's happened here. I know you're probably very, very upset. But I just want you to know we're going to work together on this. I'm going to go back and get you a raise, which he did. And he was such a great guy to work with. You never felt like you were working for him. It was like you were working with him. And
can you talk about it just for a minute? You see, one of the videos I saw on the basketball site, you were sort of reflecting on his public persona and his public image versus his how he was in real life, sort of kind of thing.
I think that's why Ralph and I got along so well, is because we were very similar in our private. I mean, I'm not a flamboyant type person at all. I'm very reserved, but Ralph had this image of being a flamboyant person. He had an afro haircut when he came, and he would gyrate a lot at the end of the bench and would get on officials, and but privately he was as down to earth as you could be. I mean, and the thing of it is that when he was hired, I said to myself, okay, I'll stay here a year and then I'll find something else because this isn't going to work. And he gave me so much responsibility right off. He trusted me. We never had a staff meeting. We worked together for 18 years and never had a staff meeting. We would just sit down like you and I and talk. He was so easy to work with. When he came in, he said, Jim, we're going to win a national championship. Now, he didn't say in 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years. He said, we're going to win one. And I thought, yeah, okay.
Talk about this, people you were recruiting prior to Underhill, and so the sort of the quality line and so forth of that.
Well, I thought I've said this publicly many times. I felt like back in our early days, Dayton's basketball program was the program in town. We were like the stepchild, and nobody paid any attention to us. We played in the high school gym for a while, and so on and so on. And so when we recruited local players, if Dayton wanted them, we didn't get them. We didn't even get to talk to them. It was like that. And there was a Alter High School here in town, and Dayton was a very, very good high school basketball program, and their good players always went to Dayton. I mean, Jim Paxson, and I could go on and on. They had several players from Alter that went on and played at UD. Well, there was this young man, Bob Schaefer, who we recruited. He was 6'6".
From Alter?
From Alter High School. He was their best player.
Was UD recruiting him?
Oh, UD was recruiting him. Miami was recruiting him. And we were recruiting him. And we got him. He signed with us. And I felt like at the time that this was a huge
And
deal.
what
for
year
us.
was that, roughly?
Gosh, that's a good question. He played a year for Marcus, so it would have been
77?
77, 78, somewhere in there. I think he might have played 1 or 2 years with Marcus, and then the rest with Coach Underhill. But everybody knew Bob was the best player at Alter, and for us to get him was a huge coup for us because it gave us credibility. It gave us credibility in the Dayton area. And then as time went on, we were able to get Bill Edwards, who's the all-time leading scorer. He's a local player. And
where is he? Middletown? No.
he went to Carlisle High School, and there's an interesting story about him. I was in my office one day, and I got a phone call from a gentleman who I didn't have any idea who this guy was. And he's going on and on. He's talking about these 2 players down at Carlisle High School, and he's telling me how great they are and this and that. And I'd lived in Dayton all my life, and Carlisle is an all-white community, and I know this, and I'm listening to this guy, and I'm thinking, okay. I said to him, sir, I don't know you, and I don't want you to take this the wrong way, but we're in a situation here right now where we really would like to recruit an African-American player to even out our squad. Mm-hmm. And he said, well, they are African-American. And I had been talking to the guy for 10 minutes. He had been telling me how good these guys were. And then I said to him, have you seen them? Well, what a stupid statement to make after he had been... And so he, of course, said yes. And so I knew the coach there really well. And I called the coach right away. And I asked him, I said, how in the world did you get these 2 guys to come to Carlisle? I remember, I'll never forget what he says. Jim, it's like a godsend. Because the year before they had won 2 games, and now they were like 16-3 because they had Bill and his brother, and so I immediately went down there and watched practice that night.
So he was flying under the radar.
He was flying under the radar, and he was being recruited in football. Georgia Tech offered him a scholarship as a wide receiver, and a lot of coaches felt like Bill didn't play hard, that he just. And I viewed it this way. I looked at him and he's so talented that it looks like he's not playing hard, but he is playing hard. That was my perception. That's how I viewed him. Well, so we immediately started recruiting Bill, and this is the interesting part of the story. Bill, and I tell Bill this. Bill and I have talked several times about this. If I called him on the phone and Bill didn't, if I didn't talk, there was no conversation. He was so shy, he just wouldn't talk, and so you never knew. You would call him and you'd talk with him and you'd say, he's not interested, because he would never say anything. Mm-hmm. And so it was very frustrating. So anyway, one day I called him and he told me he was going to Bowling Green because they were going to let him play football.
He was going to play football and basketball?
Yeah. I said, Bill, they're not going to let you do that. Oh, yeah, Coach Brown. Oh, yeah, they're going to let me play both. I said, Billy, they're not going to do that. Well, he insisted they were, so that was the end of it. So a couple weeks went by. Now, Billy had a brother, Robert, who was not quite as good, wasn't as good academically. Mm-hmm. We couldn't recruit him for academic reasons. But he was good enough player to play college basketball. And so a couple weeks went by, and we got a phone call from the superintendent at Carlisle. And both Coach Underhill and I knew the guy through a different, not through Billy, but through a different situation. And he was wanting us to help Robert get a scholarship to a junior college. And I said to him, why don't you call Bowling Green? That's where Billy's going.
Yeah.
And he says to me, Billy's not going to Bowling Green. I said, I just talked to him a couple weeks ago. He's going to Bowling. No, Jim, he's not going to Bowling Green. So, to make a long story short, 5 days later, we signed Billy to a scholarship.
What happened to Bowling Green?
I don't know. To this day, I don't know what. I've never asked Bill about it. But anyway, he signed with us, and of course,
that was
the rest is history. Yeah.
So Ralph took over in
78,
and talk about what did he do? What was your job? You said he gave you a lot of responsibilities. What was your job working with Ralph?
Well, recruiting. He coaching on the floor. I never had to. I never had to look at him. It's funny, when I was coaching with Marcus Jackson, Marcus brought an assistant coach with him. I don't mention names, but he brought an assistant with him. And every time the assistant would say something, he'd glance over at Marcus to see if it was okay. And that always bothered me. And I felt like, the players see that.
Sure.
And I never had to worry about that with Ralph. I mean, if I said something in practice, I never had to worry about anything. I mean, even if he didn't agree with me, he wasn't going to make an issue of it. He was just so easy to work with. But I did a lot of recruiting.